Hello everyone, welcome back to the Mistress of Philosophy video channel. I'm sorry that it took a long time to post this vlog after the previous one. That is because I have a new job now in a new city and I had to move and focus on other things besides running my YouTube channel. But now that I'm a little settled down, I'm in a new house as you can see, I should start to produce some more video logs and try and post them regularly, except during exam and grading week when I'm going to be grading a huge number of papers. So back to the channel topic. Today I said I would talk a little bit about systems of Indian philosophy. So when we study any textbook of Indian philosophy, or you come across Indian philosophical textbooks which are regularly taught in a number of universities, Indian philosophy is classified as systems of Indian philosophy or schools of Indian philosophy, which means there are some coherent titles or labels given to these philosophical systems like Nyaya, Vaisheshika, Charvaka, Bauddha, Jaina, Sankhya, Yoga. They're also sometimes called as schools of philosophy. It's sort of a loose title to say that this is a kind of a cluster of philosophical ideas that seem to center around certain kinds of concepts and texts. It's a nice way to study philosophy because it seems like it is very, very systematic. That's why it's called systems of Indian philosophy. So if you were a student, it would be easy to pick up a book, say, there's a famous book by Hiriyarna, it says Seven Systems of Indian Philosophy, or Classical Systems of Indian Philosophy, or Schools of Indian Philosophy. And you would find under Jaina, there would be like, what did they believe? What did they think about? What is their metaphysics? What's their epistemology? The major thinkers, and it's kind of an encyclopedic entry of the system and all the thoughts and concepts that are found in it. It's very nice so as to be a pedagogic kind of textbook because it's very easy for us to teach. You just go by, week one Jaina, week two Sankhya, then we do one more week of Nyaya and one more week of whatever and finish it all up. But is Indian philosophy really so systematic and so encyclopedic? And what are the problems with an imagination of Indian philosophy in this way? That's something I would like to discuss today. First of all, when you look at something like a system, it looks like a closed system, right? It looks like the way we describe religion also. There's such and such a religion, such and such is the prophet of the religion, such and such is the holy book of the religion. These are the practices they do. This is how they pray. This is their God. They're monotheistic, polytheistic. So we have this really rigid conceptualization of the religion neatly marked out in a square where you can actually, sort of correspondingly say this is this, this is this, this is this. So kind of fill in the blanks. The holy book of the Hindus is dash Bhagavad Gita, whatever, right? The main thinkers of Hindu religion were whatever, Swami Vivekananda, or you can say whoever, right? And then the main gods are Brahma, Vishnu, Maheshwara, right? So what happens when you do that to a philosophy or even a religion for that matter is that it gets frozen in a sort of a definitional terms, that this is exactly the kind, these are the things they thought about this, these are the things they thought about it, and it kind of feels like that is a perennial eternal system that existed all the time in the same form and continued to be the same throughout history. It becomes a museum piece, it becomes an archaeological curated piece, a representative piece that represents the philosophy in all its aspects. It's a monocultural view of that philosophy. When you actually get into the history and the development and the text of that particular system, as they call it, we realize system or school is a very loose term. Over years, the philosophy keeps changing. People add commentaries, new things come in, new things move out. There are syncretic schools, schools join together like Nyaya Vaisheshika. So there's a historical evolution of ideas which kind of gets subsumed under this larger project of making it into a frozen system. Somebody who mentions a lot about this frozen system and discusses this as doxographies and finds out how the system came to be so kind of defined through the title known as Shat Darshanas, or the six philosophical systems, is Nicholson in his book Unifying Hinduism. It's a very interesting book to read. I wouldn't say believe everything that is there in the book, but it is worth critical reading. To look at the way in which texts, which are called doxographies, or these texts which were written in the in Indian philosophical texts or traditions, kind of classified philosophies into these 6 traditional systems or 8 traditional systems, or whatever you want to call it that way. So you would classify the systems into systems that depended on the Vedas, for instance, and systems that didn't depend on the Vedas for authority. So in Indian philosophy, we always tell the students that the theistic systems are those that believe the word of the Vedas is the final authority. On the other hand, those that don't believe the word of the Vedas is the final authority are heretic. It's a bad word to use, but they are the atheistic schools. Inside the philosophies itself, there are many atheistic philosophies that don't believe in the notion of a god or Ishvara. For example, Sankhya has 2 kinds of Sankhya. There's one Sankhya which believes in a god, which is called Sa Ishvara Sankhya, which kind of joined with yoga and became Sankhya Yoga. And then you have another system of philosophy which is called Nirishvara Sankhya, where there is no personal god or an overseer of the world. Similarly, so within Sankhya itself, you have another school where you have this idea of Purusha and Prakriti. But over time, in the practice of yoga, for example, I've seen myself that when people do Sankhya Yoga, they call it Sankhya Yoga, but the way the principles are taught is through the framework of what we know as Advaita Vedanta or Vedanta, which is probably the most popular philosophy that everyone knows about today, about Brahman, the unified consciousness, Atman, the innermost self, and all of us are individual selves moving towards this one Brahman for enlightenment. It is so popular that it's very, very popular even in the West, right? And so yoga has become Advaita philosophy based, whereas yoga was originally Sankhya philosophy based. In fact, Shankaracharya, who's the formulator of the Advaita tradition as we know it today, actually borrows the entire metaphysical ideas from Sankhya and puts it into Advaita, kind of takes the whole set and says, I don't want to deal with the world, let me just adapt the Sankhya system to me. And so we find that these philosophical systems are not frozen into schools or systems. They're not closed off archaeological artifacts. They're moving thoughts. They're kind of migrating thoughts. They're constantly evolving, losing out ideas and concepts, changing ideas and concepts. Nowhere is the more fundamental change visible than in the philosophy of Nyaya, because in the 13th century, there was a completely new Nyaya system of formal logic and logical rigorousness introduced in a school in Bengal known as the Navya Nyaya school, the new Nyaya school. So we don't have a Navya Sankhya school. That's because we are not allowed to grow and work with those philosophies. Those philosophies become sort of sacred texts in which retellings of these concepts is not possible. For example, I can't posit a new kind of Sankhya. I can only posit something, but it will not be accepted as philosophical systems because the philosophical systems have already been frozen into 6 schools of philosophy. In Western philosophy, this doesn't happen because the traditions are known by a broader general traditional philosophical name. For example, phenomenological traditions, or modern philosophy, or medieval philosophy, or you could even call it like something like the British analytical tradition, the American pragmatic tradition. So if you belong to the American pragmatic tradition and you're a new thinker in a university, you can still contribute to that tradition by challenging an older philosopher and making it different. In Indian philosophy, that's not possible because I have to always go back to the texts that are considered to be authority, and anything that is not in that text would not be considered a part of the system. So they've closed off the system. And this, Nicholson believes, is sort of a colonial um, Orientalist idea of philosophy that has been foisted on us, that our philosophy is very frozen and very perennial. So the idea that this philosophy is always the same, Indian philosophy has always been the same. The Nyaya people have like this many padarthas or metaphysics. They have this many pramanas, and so it's like a list philosophy. So the problem that with Indian philosophy, where I mentioned earlier that it's like lists, the list philosophy is a colonial encounter with Indian philosophy. When Indian philosophy is rewritten in English, it becomes a set of lists. But actually, the texts are very rich, vivid, phenomenological, experiential explanations, playing around with language, playing around with thoughts. And so, if you want to really study Indian philosophy, sometimes it requires you to break the barriers of thinking of it as a frozen system. Rather, think of it as a fluid, moving system of thoughts and concepts, which perhaps, if you search for it, are present in the world of India, in the culture of India, and they're lived concepts. They're no longer like frozen dead concepts, which are in a old Nyaya textbook. So this is something that is a project that I think if you're really interested in Indian philosophy, you should pull your head out of some of these textbooks and start looking at conceptualizations that are present outside. And so with that introduction to the immensely complex topic of the Indian philosophical schools, I sign off here today. I will be back next week again. I'm also not going to edit these videos or add any extra things to them because I believe that I'm taking so many online classes that it's become quite automatic for me to talk to myself on the screen. So I'm very comfortable with the camera now. And so we should continue these conversations, sometimes with a cup of coffee, sometimes on a warm Sunday afternoon like today. And I shall see you in the next episode, continuing this conversation on systems of Indian philosophy. If you have any ideas and if you have any thoughts, please put them in the chat box below. And I prefer to talk rather than type because there's a lot of stuff going on in my life right now. I have enough papers to type. So I will be replying to your questions in the next episode. So till then, ta-da, and happy March.